I don't know, said the driver. I just bring it up. We cursed and began unloading the ammo as fast as possible. We had expected the water to be in several 5-gallon cans, each of which weighed a little more than 40 pounds. We worked as rapidly as possible, but then we heard that inevitable and deadly 3 big mortar shells exploded, one after the other, not far from us. Uh-oh, the stuff's hit the fan now, groaned one of my buddies. Bear a hand, you guys, on the double, said our NCO. Look, you guys, I'm going to have to get this tractor the hell out of here. If it gets knocked out and it's my fault, the lieutenant will have my can in a crack, groaned the driver. We had no gripe with the driver, and we didn't blame him. The Amtrak drivers on Peleliu were praised by everyone for doing such a fine job. Their bravery and sense of responsibility were above question. We worked like beavers, as our NCO said to him, I'm sorry, old buddy, but if we don't get these supplies unloaded, it's our ass.
Digital 410 Productions proudly presents the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast with your hosts Dodd Abernathy, Jeff Copsetta, and Henry Sledge.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast, your favorite World War II-based podcast. And we are back for another episode. And this is episode 99. I've already said 199. I've already get ahead of myself. Episode 99. And at the end of the podcast, we're going to make a brief programming note. But more importantly, everyone is here with us tonight. We got Jeff Copsetta. We got Henry Sledge. We got Leighton Hughes. And I'm going to give Henry the privilege to go into introducing Leighton to everybody. But first and foremost, how are we all doing tonight?
We're doing good. I'm doing good.
Jeff, you doing good?
Hey, you know me. Every day is outstanding.
And Leighton, how are things over there? I know, first and foremost, thank you for getting up so darn early to join us on the show here. So kudos to you for that. But how's everything else going on over in your neck of the world?
Yeah, good. It's very early, but yeah, excited to be on you. Henry's spoken a lot about you guys since he first joined you, so it's quite bizarre having been watching you on YouTube when I've been working, or listening to you guys to actually being on you now and in conversation. So yeah, it's quite bizarre, but very cool.
Well, Leighton is the producer of We Happy Few 506, and he's a really good friend of mine, and I just wanted to give him the chance to kind of be front and center as our featured guest tonight, because I know We Happy Few 506, you do yeoman's work, but you're always in the background.
Oh, thank you, Tom. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's good work. It's having, I think it's quite a privilege being part of that team. It came out of nothing and it's turned into something big to a point where we're now looking at being in asked to host an event in Bastogne next month. So, which has gone way beyond what I was expecting when I first started. So yeah, it's pretty insane.
Real quick, if you don't mind me asking, how did the producing role? How'd you get involved in producing of that show?
So I did a thing online last year. I was on a Band of Brothers Facebook group behind the scenes called Band of Brothers Behind the Scenes. I was helping out with that, and I knew one of the actors. We had a mutual friend, it was a family friend, and he was the sound producer that one of the actors worked with, a guy called Joe May, who plays Ed Shames in Band of Brothers. And with lockdown, obviously things were very much new. No one knew what was going on, and I think just to keep myself occupied during lockdown, I started to think, well, curry signings. So doing private signings with the actors from Band of Brothers and focusing on the really hard to get guys. Got Joe agreed to do it. And it's just snowballed from there. Went for Joe, did the guy who played Peacock, David Nichol, did Mark Ryan Jordan, who plays John Julian, and went along to a point where I ended up doing it with Matthew Leach. And I'd known Matt anyway. We'd met in Bastogne the year before. And he put some photos up on Instagram about him doing a sign-in. And it just snowballed. People were asking him to do it again. And he reached out and goes, I'd love to do it. another one. Maybe next time we do me filming it where I get to talk to people. And that was an idea. I thought, okay, that's something we could try and do that. It's a bit of hard work, but okay. But when we first met, we started talking, and we chatted a lot of sports. And I'd send him a signed rugby shirt, and he raised the idea at the time about doing a podcast, sort of Q&A podcast with fans.
Sure.
And it was just before lockdown happened, so that went when lockdown happened, that went off, and obviously fast forward a year, that got brought forward. I raised it because I heard Matt on a Reenactors podcast, and I thought he sounded fantastic. And I just watched the Platoon documentary on Amazon Prime, Brothers in Arms. And I sort of gauged the idea, saying, how about we do something like this? Watch this documentary with Paul Sanchez, who's the director who plays the doc. And we do it as a live Zoom. So we mashing it all together. Initially wanted to keep it away from history, making it all about the production, getting various actors on, relationships. And yeah, it sort of snowballed. So initially we were doing the Jimmy Maggio and Matthew Hickey, who plays O'Keefe, was going to be our first one, bringing those two back together. And Matt pulled one out of their hat and said, well, how about we do Shane Taylor, who plays Doc Rowe, and Lucy Jean, who plays Nurse Rennie.
Mm-hmm.
Never been done, never been seen. And start off with those two, really hook people in.
Yeah.
Not that, Picante and O'Keefe wasn't going to hook people in.
Come on, O'Brien, watch the line. It's O'Keefe.
Yeah. It's O'Keefe. He's brilliant. He's such a nice guy.
Mm-hmm.
He's become a really good friend of mine, Matthew Hickey is. And so, yeah, we did it with Shane Taylor and Lucy Jean. We had some of the guests come on. We had the director come on from the Bastogne episode, David Leland, Ben Kaplan, who plays Smokey Gordon, Doug Allen, who plays Alton Moore, come on. And it just snowballed. Next one, we had Dexter Fletcher, Mark Warren, Eric Borkreiter, Rick Warden, and it's just gone to a point of having Donnie Wahlberg on, Cudlitz, Scott Grimes, Richard Speight Jr. It's been insane. It's been a hell of a ride. And obviously, I've always had a huge interest in the Pacific.
Sure.
And, I love, with the old breeds, I've got the book. I've now got about 3 copies of the book from the first edition to the paperback. And I wanted to dip into the Pacific, and doing a little bit of research, obviously came across Henry. And obviously we reached out to Henry, and we did that, and obviously it's, yeah, in a nutshell, yeah, that's where it is in the long and short.
It's amazing how much production and productivity and new ideas actually got launched, rolled out, and succeeded during COVID. I mean, you hear this a lot with a lot of people who were like, well, we're locked down. I was working from home, or unfortunately, a lot of people weren't able to work, but they were locked down. And, there's a lot of people, myself included, and I know Jeff's the same way, and Henry, there's a lot of creative people who have all these ideas and these things they want to do, but when you're on that 9-to-5 grind, you're parenting or whatever, and you get into that rut, if you will, or not even a rut per se, because rut has a negative connotation, but you get into that cycle, that rhythm of life, and you're just pumping along, that you don't have time for those creative things. And then all of a sudden, when the whole world stops and you find yourself locked in the house for 24 hours a day, you might break that drawing book out and open up those crayons and those drawing pencils for the first time in 15 years and sit down and draw or paint, or come up an idea for a podcast based on a fantastic show. And boom, next thing you know, you're talking with Donnie Wahlberg and a Henry Sledge.
Look, and Jeff, you and Don both know from when I first came to you guys, I was on hiatus from the whole World War II thing. Leighton is the guy that brought me back into it.
Well, we want to thank you for that.
Yeah.
Cheers, anyway.
Let me ask you, and maybe this would be an interesting question, because I think you're only the second person I've had on this podcast from over on that side of the globe. And it may be because it happened in that area, the war impacted that area so greatly. But what was it, or what age was it for you that the World War II bug really set in on you and took effect? Because obviously over here in America, it hits fewer people because we weren't impacted at such a great deal, at least for the younger generations. But what was it for you? And is it more, obviously for your grandparents and all that and their generations, they were greatly impacted. But do you think probably more of your counterparts over there are affected by it even today more than, let's say, Americans are?
I don't know. I think it's faded out a little bit. Unless you've got a huge interest in it. From where I'm from, it's me and a couple of my friends are interested in it. I'm probably the more hardcore out of, say, the three of us out of X amount. I think when we were kids, obviously we were chatting before the show, you know, Memphis Belle captivated me as an 8-year-old.
Sure.
I think it might have been 8 or 9 when that came out. And obviously reading Robert Morgan's book, I was quite shocked to think, wait, where's Dennis? Where's Virgil? Where's Rascal?
Yeah.
What the hell's going on?
Jeff killed that Santa Claus for me too, because I never read the book. And so as far as I knew, the Virgils and the Dennises, they were the real cats. But no, Jeff killed that Santa Claus for me too.
I mean, hey, in all fairness, because I'm with you guys. Exactly. I mean, I saw the William Wyler documentary long before I watched the movie. You know, I think I was, I don't know, probably 7, 8 years old. Like you said, when the Memphis Belle, the Warner Brothers production came out. But I just remember that, my dad had it taped on a VHS, from whatever, one of the local channels when it came on, the old documentary. And yeah, same thing. I said, this is weird. So I knew Robert Morgan's name before I saw the Warner Brothers production. And it just really, it blew my mind, not just the difference in the nose art that, they really changed they changed the girl. They changed, the way the name was written, Memphis Belle. They kind of changed the story a little bit on how they met. But when I had the opportunity to meet Colonel Morgan, that's the first thing I asked him. Why would you not, why did you guys use different names? And he said, look, it wasn't about us. It wasn't about Robert Morgan, Jim Varenis, and Chuck Leighton. And, it wasn't about those guys. It was about the plane. It was about 10 men. It was about that struggle. So he said they wanted to be careful. They needed a name. They needed an airplane. They used the best one out there, of course. But it was not about the individuals. So it made sense after, hearing it from him, because 8 of the 10 crewmen were still alive. And, we're part of the advisors for the film. And they all were in agreement with that. They didn't want their names used. I thought that was pretty impressive.
I think that's a little bit of the bleed over from their generation, because as we've heard, veterans and people who were alive that time say, when we got back to the war, no one, quote unquote, bragged about it because we were all over there. It was a common experience we all had. And so here, all these years later, they're like, it's not about us. Everybody was over there serving their own part. So let's make a film using some generic names to represent everybody who was over there in this particular branch. And I think that's a huge carryover from that generation. I think some of that could be greatly used in our current generations these days.
Yeah.
I think it was more of a shock that they weren't actually the first aircraft to do the 25 missions either.
Right.
I don't think they were the second either. I think it was Hell's Angels.
Yeah. And, there's a twist of irony there, because actually the first bomber crewman to do 25 missions was Robert Morgan's co-pilot, Jim Varenis. That's the most intriguing part. And that statistic did not come out until decades after. I would think he would have known. So I'm curious if that was kind of more of a hush-hush, like, hey, you want to go home? All right, keep that to yourself, But yeah, there's a really good publication about everything Memphis Belle. I've got it on the shelf behind me. Biography of a B-17 Flying Fortress, where they go into that, where they look at all of the records. Because, of course, Robert Morgan and some of his crew, he had a kind of a core group. The gunners would come and go. A radio operator would come and go. Ball turret gunner, things like that. But typically your pilot and navigator, bombardier, and a lot of times his tail gunner, Johnny Quinlan, was kind of a good friend. So that was kind of his core group, and they would fill in from there. So he would fly other airplanes. I think he flew a couple missions in Yankee Doodle or one or the other, the Jersey Yank, stuff like that. But so even Morgan had more than 25 missions by the time, that the crew, the Memphis Belle did. But Jim Varenis actually was only his co-pilot for the first few missions and went off. He was a captain as well. So he went off, got his own B-17 and flew 25 missions before Robert Morgan did. And there was something that William Wyler, there was some enigma about the Memphis Belle. And Don, you can pitch this, that we did a whole episode on What's the Scuttlebutt about the Memphis Belle, so I don't want to take too much time away. But yeah, it's interesting the way history just kind of works itself out, and it works. They didn't have to be the first. They didn't have to have any actual historical superlative, but whatever it was, it worked, and it got guys like us talking about it 75 years later.
And I think the interesting about that movie and when that theatrical version was released, I think it had been a long time since there was a movie on that scale about that particular subject matter. Obviously, through the 80s and 90s, there was a lot of Vietnam movies, and you had some, World War II infantry-based movies. But what was another large-scale Hollywood theatrical release about Army Air Corps before that movie came out?
Would it go all the way back to 12 o'clock?
Probably,
12 o'clock,
yeah.
I don't think it goes quite that far back. Steve McQueen did one after, I think, 12 O'Clock High. When did Tuskegee Airmen come out?
Oh, that was the 70s, wasn't it? Was that the 70s?
Tuskegee Airmen, was it that far back?
Was that with Lawrence Fishburne?
Yeah, Lawrence Fishburne and Cuba Gooding. I don't think it goes quite that far, but it could. But Don, you're right. That's a good point. Either way, it had been a while.
The one with Lawrence Fishburne. Go ahead.
I was going to say, you mentioned Cuba Gooding Jr. there. I think I was really disappointed with his one because that was an outstanding cast.
What was that? That was Red Wings. Well, yeah, Red Tails.
No, well,
absolutely outstanding
Cuba
cast.
Gooding was in both. Cuba Gooding was in. Oh, absolutely, yeah.
2004. At least that's what the date on the DVD. No, that's. Hold on, I'm looking at the Amazon. I'm trying to find the IMDb on it. Go ahead.
Yeah, he was one of the young pilots in Tuskegee Airmen, and he plays, I think, a major in Red Tails.
That's right. Yeah, Red Tails was. I was just really disappointed with that. I was really excited.
Yeah,
really excited, and just felt badly acted, and too many people survive. Things like young chap who gets shot down over Italy, and he still makes it back.
1995 was when it came out.
What's that?
1995 was the original.
Oh,
yeah.
After Memphis Belle, yeah.
So let's see. Stars Lawrence Fishburne, as you guys said, Alan Payne, Malcolm Jamal Warner. Let me expand here. Malcolm Jamal Warner was from Cosby Show, was he not?
Uh-huh.
Let's see. Andre, let's see. Cuba Gooding Jr. played Billy Roberts. Mekhi Phifer, you guys probably know him from 6 Mile. I'm seeing if there's any other recognized.
Memphis Belle was what, 92, 91?
90, I think.
90. Yeah, 90, yeah.
I think
possibly Catch 22 then, even before Memphis Belle, which was...
I just restarted watching that the other day. I saw the very first version of that at a World War II reenactment on a side of somebody's trailer, and I'm watching it for the first time. I had no advanced knowledge of this movie. I'm like, yeah, they're on a lot of drugs when they did this movie. And then, interestingly enough, the Amazon Prime remake with George Clooney, I almost liked better because they kind of took a lot of the esoteric nonsense out of it and made it a little more fun. I just for fun, while editing video, I started watching the original version the other day. But that's definitely an interesting flick.
Yeah, I watched it when it came out. And then rewatched it probably a few months ago, and I thought, I want to watch the old one.
Memphis Belle, 1990.
Oh, wow. Obviously, fun fact, obviously, Matthew Modine, I think that's quite nice. It's quite weird, but quite nice. Is obviously Memphis Belle, based at Bassingbourn, and he filmed Full Metal Jacket. That was filmed at Bassingbourn.
Nice.
A few years before, yeah. So sort of nice little, that was quite a nice little thing.
Yep, Sean Austin, Billy Zane. I keep forgetting Billy Zane was in that. That was the movie that really
introduced the show.
Yeah, but you know who stood out to me from that movie, because obviously he was a huge pianist and a huge performer, was Harry Connick Jr. And that was like the movie that brought him in the lexicon of a young Don. I think I saw that movie alone at the theater, because back in the day we would do this thing where we'd go to the movies every weekend. But me and my siblings, none of us wanted to see the same movie. So my sister and brother would go see a movie by themselves. So I went and saw Memphis Belle by myself. I think I saw Fletch by myself. There's a handful of movies I remember. I sat in a movie theater by myself in middle school watching that. So, yeah, Memphis Belle was one of them.
Outstanding cast. I think, was it a young Eric Stoltz?
Eric Stoltz, yep. Tate
Who is,
Donovan, D.B. Sweeney, Sean Astin, as we said, Harry Connick Jr., Reed Diamond. Who else do we recognize in here?
Courtney Gaines.
John Lithgow.
Yeah, John Lithgow.
Yeah. There's always a religious one.
Yeah, but it looks like, that is an interesting thought game is, Air Corps base movies that came out in the 90s and how many there were.
I probably would echo what Jeff said. I go back to when I was a kid. Of course, I'm a lot older than you guys, as Jeff reminded me earlier. But
current events.
I'm not that old, Jeff. But no, going back in the Wyler footage, I remember seeing that in documentaries and stuff long before I ever saw Memphis Belle.
Yeah.
I only discovered the documentary way after, it was before the age of the internet. So reading up on the Memphis Belle, flipping heck, I couldn't navigate a library either. So I had the TV, and then that got me sucked right into absolutely adoring the B-17. Every time I'd see it, I'd go to an air show. We've got the only flying B-17 in the UK, Sally B. I saw that there. That was amazing. It was phenomenal to see. I actually went inside it a few years ago, which was just incredible. And then I was just hooked into World War II films from there. From then, came the Battle of Britain, Battle of the Bulge, which is, looking back now, is probably not that great. And I went then from, I heard you guys talking about it on last week's one. You had Saving Private Ryan and you had Thin Red Line. And I think, what Don was saying is quite confusing. But I'm good at that.
I'm good at confusing.
Jeff's about to leave us.
Jeff's like, I've had it up to here with Thin Red Line. No, basically what I was saying on that was, if you don't know anything about Guadalcanal and you watch that movie, you'll be thoroughly bored with it. But once you do some research, you'll understand it a little better.
Let me throw this out. So you mentioned Battle of Britain. It'd be cool if they do a remake of that.
Oh, they're outstanding. I think they were at one point, weren't they? I think Tom Cruise was going to be
were they?
It. I think they were. I remember reading it a while back. Yeah, I think he was going to star in it. Yeah, with a young Michael Caine.
Well,
the original.
Now's the time to do it, because as we know, Hollywood, like, the only thing they're putting out is existing licensed products, and so now would be a great time to reboot some of those movies that could have benefited from better technology when it comes to special effects.
Oh yeah,
the downside
if they redo
is
Battle of Britain, that'd be great.
The downside is we don't have availability to access to the plethora of planes that they had back then, because all that stuff was just sitting around, and now it's been scrapped.
I did an air show a few years ago. I went to an air show, Duxford. It was I think it was Battle of Britain air show. And they had quite a few Spitfires there. They got up in the air. They had quite a few Spitfires. So I think they're all right for. I think there was. I don't know. I can't remember how many, but there was a large amount at one point they'd had flying in the UK. I think they probably need a few German ones, but it would be amazing to re-see. To rewatch. Sorry. I'd love to see a great one on Bomber Command. I think that's massively missing since Dam Busters. I don't think there's been any. Excuse me if I'm wrong. I think I might be wrong on this one, but got Dam Busters way back in the 60s, 50s, but there hasn't been really anything of significance since. I think I mentioned to Henry a while back. Have you seen this on Amazon Prime? I think it's called Lancaster Skies.
Dam Busters, 1955. Believe it or not.
Leighton, how many? Isn't there only one flyable Lancaster now?
I think in the UK, the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight, which is based up in, I want to say, north of England, or near the north anyway. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've seen it fly in. I'd love it. It's based on an RAF base, but I was never based there myself, so I couldn't pop in and have a look. And it was always too far to go and visit. But I'd love to go and see it. I'd love to go and touch that aircraft, or at least get up and close to it. Yeah, I'd absolutely love to, but it's so far away. It's too far for a little bit of a jolly.
As Jeff can attest to, since he works at a Air Corps, Air Force plane museum, it's one thing to see, them sitting on the runways, but when you hear that engine noise or hear the flyover and you actually get the feel and hear the the telltale sign of those aircraft. It just brings everything to life, and it just changes the whole dynamic of being around those planes. It's just insane.
Well, Leighton, I'll tell you this much: I did have the opportunity to go in the B-17 they used for the Memphis Belle, which I think was Sally B. Correct? That's the same aircraft.
I've had a few different things, but because it's got
I
Memphis
think
Belle on the side of it.
Yeah. Of course, but it was painted up as the Memphis Belle when they were touring it around in the 90s, at air shows. I did get to go inside of that one, and I've been inside of 909. But after that, visiting the actual Memphis Belle when it was still in Memphis, on Mud Island under that kind of that white canopy area, it was just deteriorating under there. But, there's an old guy that just kind of sits there, signing the book, and he'll answer questions, and my dad and I struck up a conversation with him. And this was after we had met Colonel Morgan at the Mid-Atlantic Air Show there. And boy, that guy was like, he kind of looked around like this. Okay, boys, go under the chain. He lifted it up for us. Now, we couldn't go inside, of course, but boy, I got to touch a lot of that airplane. I just made sure I was just, yep. My hand's been on the ball turret. Yep. As I went through, probably shouldn't admit to that, but it's totally restored now. It doesn't matter. Of course, now that's sitting up in Ohio. I don't know if I'll ever get to go see it again, but that's the thing that we got to keep this stuff alive. And I wanted to make sure that Leighton, that we, express that to you before we got too off topic, is, appreciate what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's so nice to see that there's guys like Don and Henry and myself all over the world, and I think, Don, you really, you mentioned something that I was thinking before we went live is, it seems like, if you want good Jeep parts, I've got a 42 GPW, you kind of got to go to England to get them.
Yeah, right. That's where everything's at.
Or, what's the best air show in the world to see World War II aircraft? Probably Duxford.
Oh, really?
That's what I've heard. I mean, Kalamazoo was up there, I think, but a lot of the aircraft books that I have that show the flying restored World War II, you see there at the Duxford Air Museum. There's probably more Shermans in Bovington than there is anywhere else in the U.S.
Yeah, I think because they just left so much of that stuff over there.
It's one of those things because, and like Don said, it impacted that part of the world in a much different way than it impacted us here. We, our boys came home and, threw half the stuff away and gave the other stuff to their kids for Halloween costumes to get ruined. And we got a bunch of overpriced artifacts left in an antique shop, or sometimes you're lucky at an estate sale. Yeah. We didn't have that that sense of I guess being sentimental about things. Like I think a lot of the European nations are, and even the Australians. I know the Australians in fighting the Japanese they specifically had an effort put forth during the war as they were capturing things to say, okay, we already have one of these, push that back to the rear. To restore and to put on display. It was part of, the thought process that this is not always going to be here. We're going to want to tell this story. And that was conscious even during the fight. Whereas, the war's over. Okay, great. Push every one of these Hellcats off the edge of the aircraft.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's just kind of how it was. Like, oh, okay, great. We don't need any more. Throw it away. Turn that battleship to paper clips. So it's really neat to see, like I said, from your perspective on that side of the Atlantic, keeping it alive and doing exactly like what you do.
Yeah, I think Band of Brothers, it definitely reignited something in me and getting into history, because I think I was 20 when it came out. And I think, being into World War II history probably wasn't at the forefront of my mind at the time. And then watching that series from episode 1 with it running Curry just absolutely captivated me. Got Ross from Friends leading the charge.
Hi-ho, Silver!
I remember seeing Matt on there at the time, and I'd only seen Matt previously in a TV show on a kids channel about a football team, a soccer team, where he's the manager of this five-a-side soccer team. And then you've seen, all these people going through, young Tom Hardy, Fassbender, Tim Matthews. I'd seen Tim Matthews in a comedy show called Chef with a chap called Lenny Henry. yeah, it was just incredible, seeing that. It was just absolutely pulled me in. I didn't read the book for probably another 2 years, and that sent me on another journey then. Because again, I wasn't into reading, and I'd read a book called Bravo 20 when I first joined the Air Force. And again, that sent me on just reading on military history. And I think that's all I read. A few biographies of sports people, but it's predominantly military. And then the Pacific. And my brother went to Pearl Harbor not long after the Pacific had come out, and he brought back Henry's father's book. And I absolutely devoured it. And I've read that 3 or 4 times, that copy 3 or 4 times. And again, that said, I read Helmet for My Pillow. I read Red Blood, Black Sands. I was in the Falklands when I read that. I'd seen it. It was a new edition coming out on Amazon, I believe, or a edition on Amazon. I bought that. I got that sent to the Falkland Islands to read that. It just sent me. I think that's what TV shows are great. I think Band of Brothers can come across sometimes that Easy Company won the war, because it feels like it does show that. Even as a young age, I thought it shows that it felt like that they won the war all by themselves, where they were only a very small cog. But it captured people to learn history. And I've been to Normandy when the guys from Band of Brothers have been there, and it's hundreds of people there just to meet these guys, and they've got such a passion for knowing anything, a lot of things. And I think it's a great platform for getting people interested. And I'm really looking forward to Masters of the Air now, because I think it's going to capture a lot more.
Yeah, we've been waiting that one forever.
Yeah, it's going to be good. I mean, I remember coming, they announced it a few years back, and a friend of mine sent me a picture. I think it was like a running title called the 8th Air Force, and it was like the image was of the first the aircraft just looked like it was in a bit of a nosedive coming down, and I thought that looks, even from that I thought, I can't wait for this. And then obviously, Masters of the Air, I read the book a few years ago, and I thought this is amazing. It was an incredible book. And I think that's pulled me back into reading about the 8th again. So again, I'm trying to broaden my horizons now with what I read. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I've seen the set. Well, I've seen the set. I've from a distance or from the wire, because I do military reserve duty now, and the set is just down the road. And when I was there, I used to go down, especially in the summer, just to see what I can see. Just go for a drive. And stick my head in the fence, and you see 2 full-size replica B-17s there. Just looks amazing. It just, even from a distance, it looks amazing.
2 things I want to touch on before I forget. Jeff reminded me, one, we were talking about how a lot of artifacts got left there, and then obviously we dumped a lot of them in the ocean. I saw a TikTok the other day of an underwater diver, and she found probably 7 pallets of the Harley shovel heads that we use in war, just sitting look like they're brand new, all just side by side on these pallets, just rotting away. It's so painful when you see those footages of the old Jeeps underwater, the Harley Davidson motorcycles, and just all the equipment. They just, it costs too much to take back. Let's just dump it in the ocean. And then 2, when it comes to Band of Brothers, that just one of the things I enjoy doing, because you're talking about, a lot of the actors that were, you've seen in some small time shows over there, and then they got picked up for Band of Brothers. I love doing that too. I love watching newer stuff, saying, that I know him from Band of Brothers, or he got his start in Band of Brothers. And it really goes to show the level of quality the casting agency they had brought on. Because obviously, yes, Band of Brothers was huge, but if your acting chops weren't that good, there's a lot of guys who were in that show we never heard of again, but there was a ton of them that went on to do many things, because the quality of the acting skills that their casting agencies found. It always amazes me how many guys from that series went on to do many, many, many more projects. It's amazing. It always just floors me.
I think Fassbender, for me, I think he plays Pratt Christensen in Band. And even at the time, I thought there's something about him. He was very. He didn't stand out in the sense that his performances were breathtaking, but it was just something about him at the time. And lo and behold, he's a megastar now. Fassbender is. Jimmy Fallon popping up as a Lieutenant Rice.
And Jimmy Fallon being Jimmy Fallon, he must laugh through his lines because that's what he does. You guys had on, I saw one of your early kind of like your preview episodes to get people to go watch them. The gentleman who, and forgive me for not remembering his name, but the gentleman who played Johnny Martin, he went on to do a lot of, supporting roles in a lot of movies after that.
Was that Dexter Fletcher?
It's Dexter Fletcher, yeah.
Oh, I can't remember now off the top of my head, but there's a couple like action movies where he played like henchmen in the gangs and like supporting roles with a lot of lines. Like, oh, that's Johnny Martin from Band of Brothers, and I remember seeing him in a lot of stuff.
I remember seeing, I'm thinking of Kick-Ass there.
Yeah, Kick-Ass.
He was in Kick-Ass, and I think it's Johnny Martin.
Wasn't a very young Dexter Fletcher in Go Back to 1985, The Bounty? Wasn't he in that?
I think he was.
He had a very small part.
He was a child actor because he was in Bugsy Malone as well, I want to say.
Okay.
I want to say he was in, Bugsy Malone as well. I'll have to double check that on IMDb. But then he was in a thing called Press Gang. I remember that as a kid in the 90s, which is a kids' TV show in the UK. And obviously he's gone on now to direct Rocket Man. I think he took over the directing from Bohemian Rhapsody as well, which obviously had Rami Malek and Joe Mazzella from the Pacific. And now he's just directed a few episodes on the Godfather prequel, or the series about the Godfather. He's just done a few episodes on that, which has got, again, I think there's a few Band of Brothers guys in there. I think Kirk Acevedo's in it, Jimmy Maggio, and Ross McCall are popping up on that as well. Neil McDonough, we had him on, and when he does his film projects, he said during our show, he mentioned about how he always tries and gets a member of band in his productions as well. So in his last one, which was a bit of a Western, he had Jimmy Maggio in it. So he always tries and does that with every project that he does as well, that he's involved with, where he gets to control it. So I think there's certainly a brotherhood there. I think I think that's brilliant. And there's a passion, I think, as well, which is really good. I think you don't see that with many actors. There's a passion to keep the memory alive with a lot of them. And I think it's brilliant. I think a show to have an effect like that on actors who can just brush it aside once they've finished, they've got their paycheck, but to still continue to do it 20 years later, and probably beyond. I think it's a testament to not necessarily the story, but to the impact of the show, that they're willing to carry on doing this for the rest of their lives.
I got to ask you, and for those of you listening to the Audible format, I apologize. You're going to watch the YouTube video. The helmet over your shoulder, is that reproduction or is that from the set? The
that
jump
one.
helmet. Yes,
that is from the set.
Beautiful.
You don't see it. I think I was quite lucky with that, buying it online. It'd been on for a little while. I was sniffing around it, but I sort of wasn't sure whether to pull the trigger on buying it. I bought it, and it's named to Spears. It's named, obviously, with the props for Band of Brothers, they've obviously got the names written in the side of it, so they know who it belongs to, and that's named to Spears. But in episode 1, we don't see Spears in episode 1.
Right.
So whether he was there, but it just wasn't shown, or episode 1 was actually completely refilmed. I don't know if anyone knew that.
No.
It was actually, there is an earlier version of episode 1 of Band of Brothers, but Spielberg saw it, wasn't impressed, and said, nope, shit can it, redo it.
I never knew that.
Oh yeah. The original script, I've got the episode 1 script, and it's a completely different script.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah. I'll have to send you guys a copy. It's a completely
Please do.
different. It's completely different. They talk about the drumming out. There wasn't so much brotherhood. There was they covered Dietrich's death, the guy whose parachute didn't open. Mm-hmm. They cover out the drumming out as well of. They mention it in the book. It talks about that as well. Yeah, it's completely different. And yeah, the t-shirts from production as well. And there's dog tags. Matthew Hickey, who plays O'Keefe, gave me his dog tags as a gift as a thank you earlier this year as well.
Yeah, I'm not doing credit for our audience. The helmet we're referring to is one of the football style training helmets that they wore at boot camp. And so he actually has one over his right shoulder. Speaking of helmets, we're going to take a real quick break just because last week we mentioned what I referred to as the M1 correspondent helmet. And I actually got a listener who reached out to us on our Facebook page. Technically, that is the T14 photographer's helmet. And I got this letter sent to us on our Facebook, actually through the email at mail call. That's mail call at WTSP displays, normally as a nurse. After watching a documentary on Lee Miller and knowing her love for photography in late 2019, I purchased some World War II photography equipment. And as a Christmas gift for her and myself, while hunting for as much information as possible, I came across the T14 helmet and decided we had to have one. After acquiring 2 damaged non-World War II based M1 helmets, all I was lacking was the skill to make one. Luckily for me, a fellow reenactor had the skills required, so I provided him with as many reference pictures as I could, and within a few days, Brendan had turned 2 damaged M1 helmets into one T14 helmet. I installed all the new harnesses and painted the helmet, and it looks fantastic. We haven't had as many events in 2019, and those that we have had with my wife wasn't able to attend, so I haven't had much chance to have her wear it. With luck, we'll get back next year. And he sent me a link to a page. It is the 166 Signal Photography Company's website. And it says the T14 photographer's helmet. If you've ever held a Bell & Howell IMO to your eye while wearing an M1 helmet, you've probably experienced the same difficulty the U.S. Army Signal Corps cameramen did during World War II. The brim of the helmet prevents the camera from sitting properly against the eye, and unless you move it to a certain angle, the helmet is in the way. The problems of the operating of the camera with the standard helmet were noted by photographers in the field, causing Army pictorial staff to come up with a special design that would not only work with certain equipment, but provide maximum protection for the user. Now, he actually on this webpage shows the military typed up creation of this helmet, but it's too light for me to read in real time. But it does say by June 25th, reports of equipment and suggestions from France indicated that the standard Army helmet could not be worn by Signal Corps cameramen while operating some equipment. The Army's pictorial service staff had developed a visor-type helmet which could be produced by taking out a section of the standard M1 helmet and attaching the movable visor, which the cameraman could place over the eyepiece of his camera. Permission was secured from G4, European Theater of Operations, and Chief of Ordnance to provide 100 special helmets, and delivery was made to the field units in approximately 1 week from June 25th. So it looks like about 100 of these things were made in real life. And basically what the guys do now to make reproductions, they just get out a grinder, they cut the bill off, and they get another one. And much like we said last week, it almost looks like a knight's helmet, and they just rivet it on the side, and they make a visor. And I'll post the pictures he included. He sent me some real nice photos, and I'll post on the website. But yeah, he has a real nice Signal Corps impression that he does at Living History events. So I just wanted to give a shout out to Chris. Thank you so much, Chris, for contributing and listening to the podcast. And if you guys want to send us any information or questions or show ideas, please email us at mailcall@WTSPWorldWar2.com. And don't be confused like Henry if you go to WTSPWorldWar2.com and think it looks different, because I did change it a while back, but it has been a while and it is up to date. And while you are there, please click on that Patreon link, sign up. It's only $1 a month. If you really, really like us, you can sign up for the $7.50 a month plan. And after month 2, I will send you a free t-shirt of your liking. And enough of all the plugs, and back to the show. Thank you, guys. Is there any particular like World War II artifact that you collect that may be weird to people, or you can't even explain to yourself, Leighton, that you have to have?
I'd love to have a specific focus. This is going to sound bizarre. I was looking at B-17 parts. They were selling some online as one. I wouldn't say that's the weirdest thing. But I want to be able to display them as well, because I want something that can look quite nice and I can get away with it. Mm-hmm. I started looking at Lancaster bomber compasses. They're beautiful. They come in an incredibly beautiful box. And I did have one, and I was eyeing one up on Facebook Marketplace and comparing it to eBay, some of the eBay prices, it was an absolute bargain. And I just held out too long on that one. But I'd say if there's something I do want, not Nazi, but I'd say a Hitler Youth knife. They look absolutely. The design is absolutely stunning. And I've been to a few military shows here in the UK, Malvern, a few times, and they are stunning to look at. And the history behind them as well is sort of really interesting. But the price tag, I can't get away with it.
As Jeff pointed out, antiques are so expensive. There is a great antique store from here from me, and most of the booths are people who's getting rid of their collections, their parents' collection, and there's like 3 rows of just German stuff. But as you just said, the price point is just ridiculous on some of that stuff. Knives, badges, armbands, all of it. And you're like, I pulled the trigger on one, and it's a head badge off of like the bicycle that the German police rode. It's like the only thing I can afford. It was just and it has all the German writing and the swastika on it, but it was like literally the head badge off the neck post of a bicycle. It's like the only thing, only other than some coins, it's the only thing I have that's not Allied related.
Yeah, do you know what? I'll show you something now. Show you guys something now. You've just talking about that. Yeah, I've picked up some coins. I thought they were going to be bigger.
Yeah, they're small.
When I bought them, they're really small.
Mm-hmm.
I think it cost me a few pounds. I got those, and I went to a military show last year, and I'd seen it at a military show, and obviously there's this Third Reich sellers, and they had like obviously table of all sorts, and I was looking at the porcelain because it's quite cheap, and I was looking at what they had, and there's a few books they had as well, and they had, it was like, we call them sticker albums, Panini sticker albums, where we put stickers in, your football stickers of soccer players.
Sure.
And this book looked like that, but it was a Third Reich version.
Wow.
And I was looking at that, and I thought, oh, that looks quite nice. And a friend of mine, Lewis, I asked for the price, and my mate pulled me away, who was with me, said, don't buy that. I'll say, I've got one. I'll sell it to you for cheaper.
Nice.
And it's in a lot better condition. And what it is, I'll put it for you now and show you guys, actually. Where is it? It's, hope we don't get kicked off YouTube for this.
That's all right.
Wow.
So
I've tried to find out information about this. There is an article that came with this from back in 2009. The Hitler swastikas. So it talks about. I'll have to send you guys a copy. I'll have to scan it and send it to you guys to put on, or just for you to read. So there's an article because it went up for auction, and it's named to someone. It's got somebody's name in here called Arthur Shippers. And if I can, I don't know how to describe. If I can, but it's just I don't. It seems like people back in the 30s collected stickers or cards, and they just glued them in.
Yeah, they had no forethought.
Obviously, photos of the big gang.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll have to send you guys more photos of it, and I think not Nazi, just really interesting. Because the history about it was fascinating.
Well, not only that, but I was going to say I don't collect a whole lot of German stuff, but like I have a few stamps, I have a few coins, and I have that bike head stock stamp. But the reason I think it's kind of important to have 1 or 2 items, just with either if it's just a picture of the asshole on it or not, just so when someone comes over, they see it, and then like any kind of thought that was so long ago goes away, because now they see a coin. Here's a coin with Hitler's face on it. Here's a stamp off an envelope with Hitler's face on it. It makes them realize how not so long ago this actually was. And I also think it'd be more important for the future for our kids and our grandkids to kind of evidence, hey, this shit did happen. Here's a stamp with the asshole's face on it. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
I don't have a whole bunch of it, but I have a few items just to kind of wake people up when they're looking through my stuff. Like, oh, wow. So this stuff was really around. Yeah, it was.
Yeah. A friend of mine, I used to work with him in my old reserve squadron, old boy. His father worked for Rolls-Royce, and they took a car across Europe, and they met him. His grandfather had met him back in I want to say the 30s, and he's got footage. He's got film that hasn't been developed that he wants to get developed. Obviously, can't take it to Tesco's or the local supermarket.
Yeah, no, you have to find
I'll have to reach out to see if he's had it done recently, because it's been a while since you spoke about it. But he's probably got some photos that have never ever been seen before of Hitler and his cronies. And I think he said he's got his autograph as well, that he'd signed this Rolls-Royce plaque that his grandfather, I think his grandfather or father had when they were going around, and Hitler had signed it. But yeah, he was telling us about that. I think it was last year when I was with him, and he was asking me where he could get his photos developed as well. But I didn't know. I don't want to send him to the local supermarket.
No, something like that. You would almost have to like find someone who develops film. Somebody's been doing it like years. Like an old dude who has like hundreds of thousands of hours under his belt. That way, you know that it's going to survive, and they'll know how to properly do it. Because, I used to develop black and white film in high school, but I couldn't imagine trying to develop 80-year-old film and do it safely. Here's a fun little conversation. I was at an event 2 weekends ago, and someone brought up the question. This would be an interesting question for everybody. If money wasn't an issue, let's say you won the lottery or whatever, money's not an issue. You have the ability to obtain any firearms license that would require you to wherever you live. If you could have one firearm from the period, what would be your dream firearm to get? We'll start with you, Jeff.
Oh, that's easy. I was a 50 cal gunner in the Army, so it'd be the Ma Deuce.
Henry?
I would want a Thompson, like my dad carried on Okinawa.
Leighton?
The M1.
I was going to look over my shoulder. Mine's usually in here. I went to Henry route, and we were sitting on a campfire, and I said, I would get me a fully automatic Thompson. And then I wandered off to relieve myself in the bushes, and I had a thought. No, you know what I would get? And it's not a very great gun, but they're iconic, and for some reason, I've just always wanted one. A PPSH. Thompsons are super cool. I've been privileged enough to have been around plenty of them and shot them at reenactments, but a PPSH I think would be so damn cool to actually have a firing one that was not chopped up in a million pieces. The Russian
I have
burp
fired
gun.
a real one. It is that they are stellar. They are a lot of fun. They are, to me, more fun than firing a full auto Thompson.
What was the model that was similar to the PPSH? I can't remember. I was at an event and a guy had one. It looked like the PPSH, but it was a different model, and he had one. It was as close as I got into a real one, and I was super happy to see that. But I would love to just get my hands on a PPSH, and I know they're not the greatest, but Jeff has shot one, and
I've got a buddy that owns one. The one I shot was years ago at a full auto day, and it was a friend of my friend, and I was not allowed to even know exactly where we were at. But we brought the guy that I knew. We brought his Humvee, and he actually had it captured. It was a Russian anti-tank gun that the Japanese had taken, and then the Americans had taken it from the Japanese. So he brought that out there. And we had a 50 cal on top of the Humvee, and then it was about 20 guys out there, and it was just all these full auto, anything you could think of laying out there.
And then that distinctive sound of that PPSH ripping off.
Man, yeah, I've got a video of me shooting it somewhere. I'd have to try to dig up, but it was a lot of fun. But I do have a reenactor buddy, I think, that owns one. I think he still has it, and he may be coming to the air show in March. We'll have to keep in the loop on that.
I'm trying to work on that with the old lady. I'm trying to see maybe we can go to Texas next year.
Real quick, since we were talking about we're doing a little show and tell, I do have a few things from the Japanese perspective in World War II, but I only have one thing from the Germans, and it's got a really kind of a quick, neat little story to it. There was a guy that I had known years ago who it was his father that served in World War II, and it was him and his brother, I knew the son. So there's two boys, and there was three things that their dad had brought back from basically this German soldier that their dad had killed in action. He killed this guy. He took his helmet, he took his wool coat, and he took his dagger. And unfortunately, the wool coat, and he took the wool coat because he needed it. It was not a souvenir. He needed the jacket. That had since just,
Moths.
withered away from moths and ill care. And his brother kept the helmet, and the guy that I knew kept the dagger. And I was over his house for lunch one day, and he was telling me a little bit more about his dad's story and everything, showed me some actual photographs from when he was over there. And he brings this dagger out, and I go to hand it back to him, and he says, "No, Jeff, I want you to have that." And I said, "Oh, geez, I can't." Your dad killed the guy wearing this. I can't take this. This is a family heirloom. He said, "Jeff," he said, I took it out of a box in the spare bedroom in the closet. If I give it to you, more people are going to see it and appreciate it." And how prophetic those words seem now, sharing it on our podcast. But it is an SA dagger, not SS. But I couldn't get a good enough angle to show you how pristine it really is. I mean, it was as if this thing had been, under,
felt
perfect humidity, its entire life. But I mean, it is absolutely pristine. And I don't even want to know what it would cost if I had to buy it. But I'm proud to have it for sure. So that's my one and only German artifact from the war.
The only German artifact I had, and I gave it to my cousin, but you guys, I've told you guys, my dad's brother was in the 741st Tank Battalion. He was a Sherman commander, and they went at the end of the war. They were going through Pilsen, Czechoslovakia, and the big long Nazi building banners.
Mm-hmm.
They were like the length of the entire building. He jerked one off the front of the building and threw it in his tank and brought it home.
Wow.
And we had that up until a few years ago. And then my cousin asked me, and his tanker's jacket that he wore in the bulge, and she said, "Henry, I know how passionate you are about all this history, but could I have that jacket of Daddy's in the Nazi banner?" And I was like, "Of course. I mean, your father had got those. I'm not going to say no."
Was that thing like 30 feet tall? How tall?
Yeah, it was hugely long.
I had to take up so much room in his haversack. Give me the bedroll.
Yeah, really.
Leighton, you were talking about an M1, and it just kind of goes to show how we kind of take for granted our rights over here, because Jeff has access to them. I got one. Henry, I'm sure you have access to
I do have
one.
an M1, actually. Yeah.
And so it has to be so difficult, because I've had one or two living historians on from over here, and they're telling me they'll go to an event, and either they can't have firing pins, and even after the event, they got to take them to the local armory. And we just kind of take it for granted that your no questions asked, your fantasy rifle is just something that I was just at an event last weekend where there was 100 of them in the field that were all privately owned. It just kind of reminds us that we really need to be thankful for, some of those rights we have over here, that just something is common, which, we have legislation that if ever goes through on the Biden administration, not that we get into politics on here, but they were pushing around some paperwork that if it would have went through, I would have to have my M1 registered by them, and I would have to be given permission to display it at living history events. So hopefully that legislation never goes through, but there's people here trying to push that down our way.
Wow. People do have them. I've got a rubber one from Band I bought last year. It was actually quite cheap. That's in the attic at the moment because I've just got nowhere to display it.
Yeah.
But it's only a rubber one. But I thought about joining a reenactment group a couple of years ago. So I went to see a chap, part of the 101st Screaming Eagles reenactment. And the chap gave me a bit of a show and tell, and he's got one. And it's like, so the firing pin's been taken out. And my God, what a piece of, it's beautiful. It was stunning. It was, and again, it's something he has to keep under lock and key in the UK. But yeah, he had one, and he obviously let me hold it as well, which was pretty cool. But again, it's not a pretty penny.
Yeah.
But I think it's I think it's a Saving Private Ryan thing for that one, more so than say Band. I think it's because it's just that the pop that comes after it. I know apparently that was put in, but actually doesn't happen. That sound, that's a Hollywood thing. Is that right?
What's that? The ping?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you guys want to wait a minute, I can go grab mine. I can give you the ping right now.
Oh, right.
Hey, Jeff, Henry, fill in for me. I'll be right back.
I'll have mine before you have yours.
Well, so Leighton, I'll tell you the story. In 1991, a rather large box showed up at my parents' house, and it was an M1 Grand that a guy out in Texas had sent to my father because he had read, with the old breed, and my dad talked very highly of the M1 Grand, even though he was not issued one. He did not carry one as a 60 millimeter mortarman, but that's the one I have.
Oh, wow. No, I love hearing your stories about your dad. I mean, ever since we've started talking, the stuff that comes out, it's nice to have that. You read it in China Marine, obviously, as he gets on, but it's nice to sort of, in some of the documentaries, but you can't be chatting to someone like yourself, mate, face to face. When we first started talking, some of the questions, oh wow, that's awesome, Jeff. It's just been incredible to ask you questions about your dad that just from watching those documentaries.
Well, and I don't know the actual history of that M1, but I mean, back in the early 90s, I took it out and shot it quite a bit.
Oh, wow. Look at that.
I'm such a bad firearm enthusiast. I actually have an
this one here was purchased from the Civilian Marksmanship Program, CMP. So it's a little bit of a Frankenstein. It's a Harrington and Richards action, but I do have a Winchester trigger group because it had the more of the stamped trigger guard without the hole for the the winter trigger. So this is the milled trigger guard. There's I think my Opera's International Harvester got some Springfield parts on it. I took the stock completely down and brought it back up with 11 coats of Danish oil and then 11 coats of True Oil. There's your thing.
Sadly, mine's an International Arms Co. one. My top receiver is not a Springfield. But, I was going to say, Denix makes actually a halfway decent reproduction. And when I first got into the hobby, I didn't have an M1. It took me probably 6 years to find one. But some of my reenactor buddies let me use theirs. So at my living history displays, this is a Denix replica Thompson. The only problem was it doesn't have the cuts compensator. Well, it's kind of a bastard. Denix messed it up. It has the M1A1 barrel, but it has the M1 top chamber on it, so they kind of got the authenticity wrong on it a little bit. But I carried this for a while before I actually got my M1, and so I would get the Thompson pouches from my Marine Corps impression and carry this up until I actually got a M1. But yeah, this is a Denix brand Thompson.
Don, what is that? A 15 round mag or a 20 round? What is that?
It's once again, this is a giant paperweight, but it's supposed to be a 20 round mag. Actually, no, 15 round. But it has the weight of a real Thompson, and it actually has a quality stock on it. It's just, once again, it has the wrong upper receiver for the barrel on it, so they kind of messed up. Because Denix sells this version, and then they have the Chicago typewriter with the longer barrel and the cuts compensator and the grip. And so instead of making two different upper receivers to make it authentic, they kind of messed it up. But yeah, my M1 Garand I actually got at a gun show, but once again, it's an International Arms Co. because back in the 80s we had an assault rifle ban, and basically they could not sell rifles that had a serial number that was issued to the military. And so the International Arms Co. basically stamped out brand new upper receivers, popped it on, and now it's a civilian M1 Garand. Which is the only difference, is the serial number's on the side and it doesn't say Springfield on it. So sadly, they just cut up a bunch of Springfield receivers, stamped out new ones, and popped them on, and then they were legal. But we're getting pretty long into it. Henry, you're the most active one out of me and Jeff on here. Do you have anything you need to plug before we wrap it up?
No, not really. I did the Veterans Breakfast Club show on Veterans Day evening. And since that's over with, the only thing coming up for me would be Leighton, whatever our next We Happy Few 506 specific event.
Yeah, I think we've got to start planning that. Things of from our end, we just did a We Happy Few. They're all on Vimeo. We did it with the cast of episode 5. So we had Ian Bailey, we had Eric Jenderson come on. Who else?
Now you're talking about Band of Brothers episode 5.
Oh yeah, but that's what we did last time. After obviously we've got to see a Plan the Pacific one now. Obviously we've got to start looking into that.
And where can people find those episodes?
They're all on Vimeo previously, so we can rent them, so people can rent them. But we're at the moment, we're planning for Bastogne. We've got an event in Bastogne in December. We've asked by the Bastogne War Museum to put on We Happy Few 506 live, put something on live in person.
Have you guys toyed around with the idea of maybe creating a Patreon and putting those behind your paywall for your Patreon members to view? Or maybe do abbreviated edited versions or something?
I believe so. I think we have looked into it, and I think the person Joe who runs our social media mentioned Vimeo as I think the better option. Sure. I don't know. I'm very terrible with all that stuff. I didn't even know Vimeo existed until a few weeks ago. I'm that bad. I just help Matt, as he's hosting, possibly prepare questions for him, or even reach out and get family members on, which is something we had on, which is what we've done. In the past we've reunited the O'Keefe family with Matthew Hickey was one of the ones where his, Paddy O'Keefe's widow was still with us. So we had the whole family on from the wife, the daughters and the grandchildren, which was really nice. Obviously we had, on our last one, we had I don't know if you're familiar with the Band of Brothers story from reading the book, the Barnes family, who hosted Dick Winters and Harry Welsh back when they were based in Holborn. So we connected with those back in June. We met up with them in Holborn.
Have you read, not to interrupt you, but since you're on the topic, have you read Hang Tough yet?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, I've read all of Dick Winters' books. Yeah, the Hang Tough's is the diary one, isn't it? Off the top of my head.
That's the one that we had the co-writer on, where they basically took all the letters between him and Annetta, and there's a lot of Dieta, and there's a lot of content about that family over there. So for those you listening who want to learn more about that, I strongly recommend Hang Tough. That's a great book.
Oh, it's fantastic. That's fantastic. And when we met them back in June, I started talking to the granddaughter, Jean, and she asked where I traveled from. Obviously, with this accent, it's not exactly English. And I said, actually, I live up the road in Gloucestershire in Cheltenham. And it transpired that her daughter lives around the corner from where I live. So,
wow.
Yeah. It's just small. Well, the UK is a small place anyway, but if everyone's ever in the UK to swing by Holborn, it's not much there. But if you're into your easy company history, it's a phenomenal place to see, if I'm honest. But yeah, and obviously, we're look to plan the Pacific one, obviously, and with the Bastogne event now, we're trying to get all our ducks in a row with that. It's looking pretty special at the moment. With everyone, obviously, you've got Shane Taylor coming across with Lucy Jean, who plays Nurse Rennie, as well as Tim Matthews, who plays Pencala, who's never been to Bastogne. So that's going to be quite nice for him to go across and hopefully get him into see Pencala's a grave, because he's never seen it. Got Hubler again, Peter McCabe, who plays Hubler. I don't think he's ever been to Bastogne either. So again, we're going to be able to take them to these sites where their characters, sadly, didn't go any further. So yeah, it's going to be pretty special.
Well, I think we'd be remiss, Jeff, if we forgot to bring up that Walking Point was just awarded the best inspirational short film by the Franklin Film Fest in Tennessee just over the weekend. So congratulations to RJ Nevin and company over at Black 17 Studios for the continued success of Walking Point, which is how I actually became aware of Vimeo. The first time I seen it was on there. And so we just want to give a shout out. It's great that Walking Point still continuing to bring home awards at short film festivals and all of that good stuff. Well, I'm happy to say, too, that Jeff and I were able to demonstrate for you that, in fact, the Sound of the M Block is not Hollywood, but the real deal Holyfield. And I think, guys, just about going to wrap it up for this episode of the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast. Leighton, thank you so much once again for getting up at the ungodly hour, 2 a.m. your time, to come sit on the little podcast that could. And thank you so much for what you guys do over at We the Happy Few 506. And Jeff, Henry, as always, real pleasure. And thank you guys so much. And for the rest of you all, I said we're going to make an announcement. We decided that not only are we going to take off this weekend because of Thanksgiving, and the following weekend we're going to take off because Jeff had the stellar idea, why don't we do episode 100 on December 6th, which will all coincide quite nicely. So this is episode 99. The big episode 100 will be airing or being recorded on December 6th. So that means for you guys the next 2 weeks, no show. So enjoy your Thanksgiving and all of that good stuff. And for Jeff, Henry, and Leighton, we will talk to you all next week. Thank you, guys.
This has been a Digital 410 production.